Welcome to Tag1 Team Talks, brought to you by Tag1 Consulting. With Drupal 7 and Drupal 9 rapidly approaching end of life, we are hearing people talk about migrating and upgrading more than ever before. And anyone who's ever been involved with a large-scale migration, migrating a large site or application from one technology stack to another, will tell you that it's complex, time-consuming, and it demands expertise. That's why we are bringing you the series of talks, diving deep into the world of Drupal migrations. And who better to guide us than Tag1's very own Drupal migration experts? From the masterminds and maintainers of Drupal's migration tooling to the individuals behind the most groundbreaking Drupal migrations, we've got an all-star lineup who'll cover everything you need to know about every aspect of migrating large-scale applications. This team talk is part of the three-part series about ETL, extract, transform, and load process, which is used by many enterprise migration systems, Drupal's Migrate included. In today's episode, we're going to talk about how to use Drupal Migrate system to extract data from a Drupal 7 database or any other third-party source. Be sure to stick around to the end because we are also going to announce next few talks in our series. Let's dive in. I'm Janez Urevc, Senior Engineer here at Tag1 and a long-time contributor to Drupal. I'm joined today by well-known top contributors to Drupal, Benji Fisher, one of the 5 current Drupal Migrate core subsystem maintainers, and Mike Ryan, co-creator of Migrate. Welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Glad to be here.
We are glad that you are here.
Present.
Okay, for the beginning, let's explain what ETL stands for. Like where does this concept come from, and what are other ETL systems besides Drupal Migrate? Mike, I'm sure that you have plenty of experience in this area.
Yeah, I think the ETL concept really came from mainframe data migrations back in the day. I have little doubt that many of them were coded in COBOL. My first introduction actually was before Drupal. I worked in HR, Human Resources Information Services for a hospital in Boston, and we were switching HR systems. So I was the primary person responsible for doing that migration, and that was a classic extract, transform, load. We would extract the data from the original system into CSV files, and I loaded them into Microsoft Access, where I created queries to transform the exported CSV format into the format for importing into the new system. And then we would export those CSV files and import them or load them into the destination system. So that was my first introduction to ETL.
So Access wasn't the final destination, that was just what you used for the transform stage?
Yes, we didn't have, a database server to play with or anything like that in between. We're basically limited to Microsoft Office tools because we weren't really a data center, we weren't engineers, or it wasn't an engineering environment. I was a software engineer previously. But that I learned a lot, and then around this time at a Drupal meetup in Boston, Moshe Weitzman was also there, and people were talking about trying to import raw HTML into Drupal. And Moshe looked across the table at me and said, there's an opportunity here, which is when we got together to start developing a migration system for Drupal. And of course, since we wanted to, and getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, but the original concept was importing raw HTML, but of course, you also want to be able to extract from databases or CSVs and so on, which led to the idea of a pluggable system. Specifically relevant to today's talk, pluggable extract plugins.
Did you have like a client or a website where you needed to use this, or was just like you saw the opportunity and you decided that you want to build a system?
Yeah, we started building a system. I'm trying to remember what the first was. The Economist, the first client. I think there was one before that we had. This feels like ancient history, like what, 15 years ago. Yeah, but we saw the need. We saw that sometimes the Drupal upgrade process could be difficult, and sometimes it might be easier to treat it as a migration rather than with update hooks, as was the traditional method at the time.
Yeah, that discussion I already remember.
Yeah,
I've been around for that. That happened like when we were figuring out how people were going to be upgrading their Drupal 7 sites to Drupal 8, because it was so different.
yes, the update method of it prevented making that sort of massive change to Drupal, really, because there's no way you could really completely refactor the database schema using update hooks.
Yes. So ETL stands for extract, which is about pulling the data from the legacy source, basically. Transform, which is about processing the data along the way, and then load, which is basically storing it into the destination system. And today's topic is extract. So let's dive into that. What is being done as part of the extract phase? And more importantly, how is that done in Drupal, Benji?
So there are a variety of plugins. Typically we're doing a migration from Drupal 6 or 7, and we have a database. So we know a lot about the structure of the data, and there are what we call source plugins built into Drupal. The Drupal Migrate API has its own terminology. So the extract phase is called source plugins. But the source can be lots of other things. If you're not talking about migrating from Drupal 6 or 7, you might have a CSV source, just a spreadsheet, or a spreadsheet in some other format like Excel. You could have JSON. It might be JSON API, XML or SOAP. Someone suggested that you might want to import emails into Drupal, and then you'd have an IMAP formatted file. I've never seen that, but it's certainly something that could be done. And I do want to point out that the migrate system can be used not just for creating a Drupal site out of some legacy system. It can also be used for recurring migrations. And typically when you're doing that, the source is going to be any of those formats served over an API from somewhere else. And you might be importing articles or events, users, just any sort of content that you have in any external system, and you want to get it into Drupal.
Yeah, or you could use it with commerce, for example, and import products on an ongoing basis from some other system where that is the main source of truth for your products.
Yeah, I've worked on projects that were using QuickBooks, and we wanted to get information going both ways. We wanted to get, I guess, prices out of QuickBooks into Drupal, and we wanted to get orders out of Drupal into Commerce. And I think we'll talk about that a little later, or maybe in one of the other episodes.
I think it's in one of the other episodes, yeah.
The funny thing is that we ended up using the Migrate API for both directions.
Which proves how well architected it is, in my opinion. Like the fact that you can come up with use cases that are definitely not obvious proves how powerful it is. And I think that the main, or not the main, but one of the reasons why it's so powerful is that it's architected as a pluggable system, where you have different plugin types, and then you can reuse code by implementing plugins and reusing them on different migrations. And this is something I would like to ask you, Mike, because this is so core of the migrate nature. Did you know from the beginning that it should be a pluggable system, or how did you decide that you want to architect it this way? And maybe you can briefly talk about which plugin types do we have, and yeah, why it was done this way in the first place.
Well, I did allude to that earlier, and that is the original concept. We were talking about importing HTML in raw HTML pages into Drupal. But of course, once you're using migration for Drupal upgrades or side grades, which actually that was a common use case we saw where someone wanted to re-architect their site on the same version of Drupal and transform their content types. So anyway, at the time, this was before Drupal had a general purpose entity system, and pretty much every module that had data had its own tables with their own schemas. So we needed to have distinct plugins, distinct sources for each of those, as well as to handle, occasionally you'd need to import a CSV file into a Drupal table, or again, HTML. And once you start seeing things as pluggable, it becomes natural to just make everything pluggable. All the more so since Drupal 8, which is entirely built based on the plugin concept.
Yeah, like the idea of plugins was around even before. I remember, like you had to, like CTools provided plugins in Drupal 7 world, and
even 6, I think.
Even 6?
I think the views module had plugins.
Right, yeah. It could be that even the thing that was in CTools came from views and was then extracted into the CTools, because CTools were a dependency for views, right?
Yeah, Earl extracted CTools from views, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, and then in Drupal 8 we got this. It was basically completely re-architected plugin system, and then everything moved to that. And yeah, it's quite pleasant to work with, in my opinion.
Right. Even the plugins have plugins. You can have annotations or YAML, or I think there's a third way of specifying the plugin structure.
You can always get very crazy about it. Yeah, when I was working on the media initiative, we also used plugins a lot and made everything pluggable. Like sometimes when I look back at it, maybe we even made everything too abstract, and I think this Drupal community loves to make everything abstract and everything pluggable and not opinionated. And that's very powerful, but sometimes it ends up in very complex systems. And now looking back, like I would do some things in a more simple way, in the media ecosystem. But yeah, migrate totally made sense all the time to me. Like I never had issues understanding how it works. So great job, Mike. So we already mentioned that going from Drupal 7 to Drupal 8, migrate became part of core, which is another proof how powerful and how solid it is. Which means that there is some basic functionality that ships with Drupal core, but then we also have a huge number of modules or plugins in the contributed space, which can help you run more esoteric migrations. Benji, could you tell us what ships with core and what is that mostly used for, and what would we have to turn to contrib for?
Right. So in terms of source plugins for the extract phase, core provides the API that everything is built on. So there will be some sort of base classes. There's a base class for a SQL source. There's the content entity, content entity and config entity base classes. But other than the basic things needed for the API, the criterion for being in core is that the migrate system was the way to upgrade a Drupal 7 site to Drupal 8 or later. And so the core migrations are almost entirely focused on that use case. So in terms of source plugins, we have Drupal 6 sources and Drupal 7 sources. That's basically the only thing that is supported in core. So for your migration projects, getting your pre-Drupal 8 databases migrated into modern Drupal, that's what's in core. Anything else is going to be in contrib. The only exception I can think of is the content entity, which is using the current database as a source. So Mike was talking earlier about what did you call it? Side migrations? Side grades.
Side grades.
Right, so you can do that in the current site using the content entity source, and just loop through all of your badly architected foo content types and creating var content types out of them. So for any other source plugins, we have to turn to contrib. There's the Migrate Plus module, which is maintained by Lucas Heading, one of the other current maintainers of the Migrate API. So that's sort of considered core adjacent. Things that seem generally useful but don't meet the criterion for being in core go into there. So there is a source plugin there for SQL table. And then really generic, there's a URL source plugin. So anytime you're getting something from an API, you're going to be using the URL plugin, and then the Migrate Plus module introduces its own plugins. So we know what the API is. We need typically some sort of authentication. So there are authentication plugins. We need to fetch the data and then parse it. So there are 3 systems of plugins tied into the URL plugin from Migrate Plus. And then there are a bunch of more specialized contrib modules. There's one for CSV files, one for other spreadsheets like Excel. There's a module devoted to Drupal Commerce, and both earlier versions of Commerce and I think some other systems like Magento are handled by that. There's the WordPress Migrate module, which is a specialized XML source. The idea there is you export your WordPress site to XML, which WordPress provides that functionality, and then we import the XML into Drupal.
Just to note, there are other systems that implement the WordPress XML schema. So not just WordPress, but there are certain other, I can't remember which off the top of my head, that use the same XML schema. So you could use the WordPress migrate to import from those.
Cool, I didn't know that.
So no reason to use WordPress anymore, right?
There's a views migration module, and that's something that we just decided in Drupal core was too hard. There are too many variations. Contrib modules can make their own views plugins. And we just didn't think there was a reliable way to migrate views from Drupal 7 into modern Drupal. There's a contrib module that attempts to do that. Use it with care because it is a hard problem. Don't expect it to be the final answer to migrating your views, but it can at least give you a start. And I just saw yesterday, looking at the list, there's one that migrates playlists from YouTube. There are a lot of these specialized source plugins in contrib space.
The YouTube one could be used for like incremental migrations that we mentioned earlier, right? Like if you have a YouTube channel and you want to pull the videos that you upload there into your Drupal site automatically, you could use that.
Exactly. Yeah, I suppose there might be some sites that would want to download the actual videos, and they could do that. Typically, we leave the videos on YouTube, let YouTube do what it does well, and migrate the metadata of playlists into the Drupal site, and that would be recurring as you make new playlists. As you add to the playlists, you'd want to import the new data.
Yeah, you could have a cron job that runs the migration.
It's amazing, like how thriving the contrib is, and that's usually the case in Drupal. But it amazes me over and over again how many things developers come up with, and the ideas that people have. It's just mind-blowing. Like sometimes you run into things that you would never think about, and yet somebody thought about it and had a need for it. It's really truly amazing. So I personally have done a few migrations in my career, but they were mostly migrations from third-party CMSs. I worked a lot with media companies, and a lot of times media companies would have sometimes even internally developed CMSs. And in one of the projects that I've been involved with, they realized that is not sustainable. So they decided that they want to go with something open source, and then they decided to go to Drupal. So we had to migrate from that, and we were basically using the SQL source plugin, loading data from the third-party legacy database and then importing into Drupal. But I'm pretty sure that Mike and Ryan, you have more interesting use cases that you've experienced throughout your career. So can you talk about that?
Really would have to do some archaeology on my memory to dig that up. One interesting use case, I can't remember exactly what project it was, but where there was associated data, that the primary content was in a database, but there was associated content which needed to be pulled from a web API. So the source plugin has hooks that you can implement to add to what the raw source plugin does. The source plugin produces one row of data equivalent to an SQL row at a time. and you can implement the process row hook to add to it within the source plugin. So you can read the additional data from an API or CSV or so on and add it to that row before it goes into the transform part of the pipeline.
Interesting. How did that affect performance? Because I assume that if you are calling APIs on every row, that can slow the migration down quite significantly.
Yeah, it's, I mean, it really depends on the source.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, if you're pulling from a local file, not so bad, but if it's a web API, then that will slow things down.
Sure.
And
And
as long as we're
in that case,
mentioning, the process row step, that it's worth mentioning that in a Drupal to Drupal migration, there are a lot of fieldable entities in Drupal 6 or Drupal 7, content types with fields on them, for example. And we structure it the same way. We have the base table that gives us the node IDs if you're migrating nodes. And it produces a bunch of rows, and then we use that same process row stage to attach all of the fields to that row, one row at a time.
Yes, and although I said that it's equivalent to an SQL row, but it's a logical row. In an SQL row, you're going to have scalar values, while the row object that we're passing through, we can have multi-value fields in there. So in the prepare row, if there are associated fields with multiple values, those can be extracted in the prepare row and plugged into an array as a member of the row that's going to go through the pipeline. And then the rest of the pipeline knows how to handle arrays and how to process each member of that array within the value.
Benji, I heard that you migrated a single page into several nodes in the past. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, this was kind of funny. It was part of a migration from Drupal 7 to Drupal 9, I think. And most of it was pretty routine, but they also had one page which looked like it was a views listing of some person content type. And each person had several publications, and they had a picture, and so on and so forth. But in fact, it wasn't from structured data. It was one Drupal 7 basic page with 10 or 20 of these things that looked like nodes, just pasted into the body field. And we decided we were going to restructure it and make it what it looks like and have a person content type with structured data on it. But we had to extract it from this page. Since it was only 10 or 20, and this is the funny part, I said, get an intern, have them copy and paste. You will spend as much of the intern's time as you would spend of my time. And the intern's going to be a lot cheaper. But they said, no, we want to do it automatically. I said, okay, this will be fun. And as far as the source was concerned, I just downloaded that page once and put it into the directory for the custom module we had for the migration. I ran HTML tidy on it to make sure it was well-formed XHTML. And then I used the URL plugin that I was talking about from Migrate Plus, and one of the XML data parsers from Migrate Plus. And I guess the important thing to mention is that even though it was not technically structured data, it was just one page of HTML, it did have consistent structure. So every section of the page started off with an H3, and directly beneath that, there was an image. So there was enough structure there that I could reliably pick it apart and create fields on the person nodes that I was creating.
That's very interesting. And the interesting part is that you've been able to use Contrib and not have need for custom code with that.
Right.
Did you use XPath to parse that markup or something else?
Yeah, and anytime that you're parsing XML, and I, as I said, I created XHTML. So anytime you're parsing XML, you want to use XPath, which I'll have more to say about in the episode on the transform or process plugins.
Which will be the next episode in this mini series. So definitely join us again for the T part of ETL, which is transform. Besides this mini series, we have some great talking coming up. Our goal is to put one episode per week over the next few months to support the community in the migration process. We will talk about performance, because performance is something that we care deeply about at Tag1, and it applies to migration as well. Because when you are handling really large data sets, a full data migration can easily take like 12 hours or sometimes even days. So we'll do a handful of talks on this topic, including on how to profile and tune a migration, including long-running migrations. And we'll also talk on incremental migrations, which we touched on in today's episode already. How you can include or exclude things and run a migration on a subset of data to make it faster. Then every project owner wants their migration to be a success, and we will dedicate an episode to discuss the most important factors for a successful Drupal 7 to 10 migration in order to help you successfully navigate your migration project. And other topics that we will cover in the future include porting custom code from Drupal 7 to Drupal 10, the future of migrate tooling, how to port a team, and so much more. We hope that you will tune in and enjoy our upcoming team talks. A huge thank you to our Tag1 team, Benji Fisher and Mike Ryan. Thank you for joining me. Make sure you check out the other segments in this series. There will be links to them in the show notes, along with all the other links that we mentioned today. If you like this talk, please remember to upvote, subscribe, and share it. You can check our past talks at tag1.com/TTT. That's 3 T's for Tag1 Team Talks. As always, we'd love to hear your feedback and any topic suggestions. You can write us at ttt@tag1.com. Again, that's 3 T's for Tag1 Team Talks. A big thank you to both our guests and to everyone who tuned in. Thank you for joining us.